All right, in this moment of code, we'll use CSS to present this HTML text and this web image in a format that offers some interactivity for the user. Let's take a look at what we're working with. We've got an H3 element with some HTML text, and we've got an image tag that is bringing in a JPEG. Our goal is to present this image in a way that might be appropriate as part of a grid and have some kind of interactivity. Specifically, we want the user to be able to hover over the image and then have the text appear. The text we want to appear over the image, let's say in the middle of it, and then when that text appears, we want the image to diminish in its presence. So maybe it will become partway invisible, something like that. So this students, so shout out to Jiyoung, this one's for you. So first what we're going to do is we're going to take the two elements and put them each in their own container. We'll use the div tag. Okay, this is going to give us a chance to in relation to each other. When we don't have div tags around these elements and it's just an H3 and just an image tag, they're subject to the layout logic of the document object model, the DOM, which is basically top down, left, right. So by putting them in divs, they're now objects that we can bring into other types of layouts. And the layout that we want to use, layout format, is one that's used for compositing. So I'm going to just take this and tab it up a little bit so that we can see that I've placed these two elements, which are each their own div, in another div. So this div now contains these two elements, and now we're really set up to organize these elements in a layout. So first of all, I'm going to name these divs. I'll call this container parent, container text, container image. So now that I've named these, I can now give them specific behaviors. Let's go into CSS to do this. Okay. So first thing I want to do is make this whole display element a little bit smaller. Right now this image is really big, so I'm going to set the width to 300 pixels and the height to 300 pixels. This is in the parent container. And then we'll set the image width 100%, height to 100%. We'll then take the image itself and we'll say the image should be, since it's a tall image, 100%. Okay, so first things first, I've made the container parent, which is the div that's holding all of this, 300 by 300 pixels. And then I'm setting the the two containers that are inside this container parent, namely container text and container image, to be 100% of the container that they are in. The image itself, I'm also going to say be 100% of the container that you are in. So right now, I see that I've got the text container, which is 300 pixels high, and the image container, which is also 300 pixels high. They are stacked on top of each other. I'm now going to take this whole layout and go into a layered mode. I'm going to do that by setting the parent container to have relative position, and then the container text and container image divs, I'm going to set to absolute. And you can see what happens here. They now all occupy the same space. I want the text to be on top, so I'll give it a z-index that is higher than the others. So you can see here now, here's my text. It's over the image, and the image is 300 pixels tall. If we are wondering what am I looking at here, let's put in a trace color so that we can see here's what's going on. Let's center everything. Okay. All right. So we now have all of our elements in place. Now we can deal with the behavior. What we want to do is say when the mouse touches this element, the text appears sort of as a interactive caption, and then the image kind of goes away. Maybe not completely, just partially. We're going to do that with CSS. There's a number of ways that we could do this. We could do it with JavaScript, or we could use a JavaScript library like jQuery. There's a lot of tools and options for creating some kind of interactive experience like that. But I'm going to show you a way that just uses CSS because it's simple, fast, clean, and as far as code goes, pretty elegant way to take care of all this. Looking at our code here, just want to point out that the way we've set this up, we've got this div called container parent. It has two divs inside of it, container text and container image. These two divs inside the parent are considered child elements of the parent element. Okay, so that means this element and this element have they will exhibit dependencies based on what happens to this parent element. So with that logic in mind, knowing that that's how HTML works, we're going to set up some CSS so that when the user hovers over this element, we're going to execute some controls or changes to these elements. Okay. So we're going to do that with using CSS pseudo classes, pseudo elements. And here's how we're going to do that. Going to add some CSS and say, I'll put it right here. Here's our default, right? Here's our default. Oops. So now I'm going to say, on this element, container parent, when a hover event happens, I'm going to make some changes, make some updates to this child element, container text. And the changes will be here as CSS. All right. So to see how this really works, to understand this behavior, we want this caption to appear when we hover over it. So it needs to disappear. So I'm going to go over here and say, let's make it disappear using opacity. Okay. Oops. Let's make it 0. Yeah, there we go. So it's gone. So now I'm going to set opacity to 100% for this container text element when there's a hover event happening on the container parent. Okay, so here's how it looks. Here is my layout. I see just a picture. When I hover over it, the caption shows up. And when I leave, the caption goes away. Okay, so what's going on here in the CSS? The CSS is now actively monitoring what's happening on the web page and how a user might be interacting with it. The div container text is formatting itself, and it is presenting itself in the layout, but it's presenting itself with 0 opacity. Therefore, it's not appearing, it's not visible. But when there is a hover event detected on the container parent, which is holding everything here, then the instruction in CSS is to go tell the container text element to change its opacity property to 100%. That's what's going on with just this little bit of code right here. Okay. Now, what's cool about this method is that I can now take this hover event and have it influence any number of elements inside the parent. So I can control this and I can control this. Both the text and the image elements can be controlled separately, independently, but also simultaneously. Let's take a look. So I'm going to just copy this hover event, but now I'm going to change it to influence the container image. Okay. And on the container image, I'm going to change the opacity to 50%. So I'm going to make this image kind of go away. Let's also get rid of this pink trace color because we don't really need it anymore. Okay. All right, so let's take a look. Here we are. Here's this image. I see it, and I'm going to hover on it. Look what's happened. The text now appears, and the image kind of fades out a little bit. So this would be a great way to really add some personality and style and interactivity to a grid. Imagine there are a number of these images all lined up. I could add animation onto this so that this change of state happens in a slower manner, so that my eye can really like appreciate the interactivity that's happening. Anyway, we've just used a couple lines of CSS to do this. We can further modify the CSS. If I had a whole bunch of items in here, I could control them all independently just on this hover event. So hopefully this is enough of a demo to get you started. I will save this, and I also recorded a video, so if you need to follow along and see this code getting built, you can do that. So let's see. Pure CSS. Yeah, it's good enough for now. Okay, so that's our moment of code. See you next time.